everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. It's Fundraisers Friday. Yay! Tony Beall, how
Yay.
are you?
I'm doing great, Julia. Thank you. Again, happy Friday. It's so good to see you and looking forward to another great conversation.
Me too, because, everybody thinks like fundraising is fundraising is fundraising is fundraising. Not true, is it? We need to have a different strategy, and that includes diversity. Wow, that's like a big concept.
Well, it's funny. This is the whole reason why I started my consulting business to begin with, was to really help organizations with diversifying their funding streams and really working towards sustainability for organizations. So this is a topic I'm really excited about.
I love it. Well, we couldn't have a better expert to be on Fundraisers Friday to talk about this. We get to talk about so many things here on Fundraisers Friday, and that's because we have amazing support from people like Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Holdings for Good. They are a bank just for nonprofits, and they are a new sponsor. We're really excited to welcome them on board. Again, I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, joined today by the amazing Tony Beall, Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy, the guru of all things fundraising. So I'm going to start off today in the conversation. Why is diversity in nonprofit revenue important, and why should it even be something that we're talking about?
Yeah, well, we've all heard the term, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So let's just kind of start with something that we've all heard for decades and decades and decades. And that's really what this refers to, is if we are focused on putting everything, again, in one basket or relying on one primary source of funding, we're really putting our organization, more so our programs and services to the community, at risk. And that is why diversity in nonprofit revenue is important. It reduces risk for the organization. It allows you to work more holistically towards full sustainability for the organization, and it builds resilience. So those are the primary reasons why diversification in your funding streams is so important. And we've seen a lot of that happen recently with shifts in government funding, whether the percentage has been reduced or the funding altogether has been removed from the organization. At least if there were some sort of diversification in the funding streams for those organizations, the hit may not be as hard. It's still painful, and I'm not going to ever imply that diversification is going to make up what I know for most organizations is a large chunk of federal funding. But at least the impact to the organization is minimized when the larger percentage of your funding disappears.
I love that you framed this up in such a manner, because it helps you to understand why it's so important. And I think a lot of times in fundraising, we look at this one number, this one bottom line, and we think we got to get to that number. We're close, we're far away. Are we going to make it? Are we not? And we forget to look at the strategy behind that. And so then it just becomes, kind of a never-ending hamster wheel. So let's talk about the specific areas that we should be looking at. And I would say these are kind of like the main areas.
Yeah. Major gifts, corporate sponsors, grants, planned. I'm sorry. I was like, yeah, they are the main areas, Julia. Next slide.
Yeah. I just talk about buzzkill. I just stopped the conversation. Sorry about that.
And then it was me just rolling wrong. Yeah, she's right. It's all good. So major gifts, corporate sponsors, grants, and planned giving. So these are some main areas of diversification. And what I like about these, Julia, that you're talking about, is these are the ones that have the biggest, I think, ROI. So or return on effort even. I like talking about ROE. So if your team members, if you're fortunate to have a team, or just you, if you are it, in your organization raising all the funds, these are the areas where you can get big wins for your effort versus maybe some of the other diversification opportunities that we might talk about.
I love it. I think it's interesting because when you think about like the difference between a major gift, that's something that generally you would have had this relationship, you would understand what the donor wanted, how they mesh with your organization, when that's going to flow. All that planned giving can be on the other spectrum just as, big numbers, but you just don't know. It's kind of a crapshoot. And you're just kind of like waiting. Yeah. And so it's really an interesting thing. In between, we've sandwiched those grants and the corporate sponsors. Um, Grants are an interesting thing right now because, as you mentioned, all of this federal shift in even just funding grants that were already awarded. And that is working itself through the court system, and the adjudication of some of this processing is going to be changing things. But
Mhm.
I find that those revenue streams as well take a different mindset, and they're a different management system. So
They,
it's really interesting.
yeah, they are. I'm glad that you pointed that out. But one of the common themes, Julia, for all of our Fundraisers Friday shows is that the true success in fundraising rests in your ability to build relationships.
Mm.
And every single one of those that we just discussed, even grants, as you build a relationship with your local community foundation or local family foundation, so that you might be invited, because not all grant giving organizations receive, you know, requests or grants without being invited. So all of these require, really strong relationship skills. And I just think it's important for us to call that out. Like you said, the major gift isn't just going to happen. It's going to happen because you've developed a relationship with a potential donor, and you've earned that trust.
Right. And I appreciate you bringing that up, and I love that you added that into the grant process, because you're right. This is not just something that you go to a website and you grab a link and you send in some paperwork. I mean, this is relationship based in so many ways, and I think a lot of times we forget about that. We just think it's like money that's going to fall from the sky. I want to move on and talk about something that is a part of donor diversification, and it's a different type of revenue stream, and that's monthly giving.
Mhm.
um, this is like, love it or hate it, people have all different opinions about this. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing more organizations that have the resources to do so, leaning into creating monthly giving campaigns and monthly giving opportunities for everyone. I think the beauty in these campaigns is that it allows folks to contribute to an organization to activate their philanthropy in ways that are manageable for them, and maybe in smaller chunks that ultimately lead to a larger sum that they can feel really, really proud of. It also enables the organization to do some forecasting, meaning they know that every month, based on who has signed up and historical data, what type of revenue they're going to be receiving through that. So there's just good strategy that can come along and along with that, and future planning when you have a monthly giving program. We also know that sometimes a donor will test an organization through a smaller gift or through a monthly giving campaign before they reach out or want to have a conversation about being a major gift donor or leaving some type of legacy.
Right. I'm thrilled you brought that up because we don't talk about that enough. And I agree. I think there's absolutely an arc of, testing, relationship building, communication. Like, what is it, the information that you're getting? What are you seeing the impact of your dollar? Maybe it is, as you mentioned, only $10 a month or $20 a month, but what is that doing? And every month, hopefully you're being communicated to so that you can see that you're part of a bigger, group. really rowing in the same direction. And so, yeah, I think it's a really great thing. You mentioned early on about how monthly giving, when it first came out, it was so arduous. You'd have to run the credit cards every month, and they wouldn't go through, or you'd have to get expired credit card numbers changed. It was just in, you'd be like, for $10, really? And it just seems so arduous. And now there's so many platforms that help navigate this, including the communication side of it.
For sure. That was on my mind too. I'm glad that you brought that up. So, we're board of directors or nonprofit leaders might have been hesitant to even consider this because of, the amount of labor that needed to be put into it for it to be successful. There are definitely digital tools now that support that and really minimize that day-to-day kind of transactional work that a fundraiser or an administrative support person would need to do.
Right. It's really an exciting time, I think, to be looking at this. So when we think about all of these opportunities, that it's not just one big number looming out there, how should we know as a team, if we're a team of one or a team of 20, what amount of time to invest in each one of these segments? Like, how do we figure this out?
Yeah, I wish I had a one size fits all answer for this, and there may be one that exists that I just don't know about. But from my experience, I always knew that in my budget, it was expected that I was going to raise, and I say I, sometimes it was just me, sometimes that's like a collective I. It was a team. Uh, but I would know going into 2026, for example, what my fundraising goal is going to be for that year. But how I got to that number were all of the lanes that were going to bring in revenue. So I knew that the gala was expected to bring in $150,000. I knew that the kayak event was going to bring in $80,000. I knew that peer-to-peer fundraising was going to, you know what I mean? So each of those lanes, those revenue streams, were part of what made up that total number. So I was able to, throughout the year, kind of track where my success on each of those streams, not just on the total sum. And I would often use that as my way of determining the amount of time to spend on a particular line item. So if the gala is making up 70% of my revenue for the year, then I'm probably going to put 70% of my time towards that larger number, that larger goal. But there are factors that come into play. Something new might happen in the market that can increase one of those other lanes. Something new might happen in the market that creates a whole new lane that wasn't even in your budget to begin with. Resources come and go and change. So there's a lot of variables around that. But just kind of basic, simple way of looking at it is what I just explained, and how I looked at my annual budget, the breakdown for each of those revenue streams, and then what percentage did they contribute to that overall goal.
So when I hear you talking about this, it makes me realize that it's incumbent upon us as leaders, or even if we're just leading ourselves, to kind of do a time tracker concept so that we know where we're putting our time into, right? Because I think a lot of times we can run around with like hair on fire moments and just going from disaster to disaster or event to event without pulling back and saying, okay, whoa, wait a minute. We need to be spending more time or effort or attention to this particular area. Hard to do.
Sure.
Easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah, easy to say, hard to do. And then I wasn't even sure if I was saying it right, if I was just talking in circles and made it completely not even easy to understand. But the other thing that I wanted to say about that is, again, you're tracking those numbers, continuously. So you really know where you are in hitting the mark. And you also understand, for example, with a gala, you may not see the bulk of that money coming in until 30 days before the event. So again, data and history play a large role in understanding how to allocate your time. So that 6 months out from the gala, if you're only at 20%, you're not freaking out because you know historically that you're always at 20%. You know, so kind of understanding the history around some of these also helps. Again, data.
Yeah, and cash flow. I mean, understanding that, and this is another reason to honor and work with your finance department. Right? So that you're marching in the same direction and you're getting that information in anticipation of what's going on, and not just after the event, or the issue where you can't make any change.
The other trap we fall into sometimes, I'm guilty of it, is if we have many revenue streams coming into the organization, there's probably one I like a little more than the other.
Yes.
So whether that's, the larger percentage of what's coming in or the smaller percentage, I have to kind of create my own guardrails and kind of touch points to make sure that, because I love this more than that I'm still giving the others all the time and attention they deserve.
Yeah, I appreciate that you brought the humanity back into this, because you're right. I mean, that's just human nature. And I think that, thank you for talking about that, because that's very true. Yeah. And I think too, there's something about leading a team. And again, if it's a team of one or you're leading volunteers or whatever, when you are excited about a certain thing, you amp everybody up around you. You get everybody excited about it. And then it's like, oh yeah, okay, that over there, we'll get to that tomorrow. So thank you for bringing that up, because I live in that space all too often. So I'm shaking my head saying, yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's tough. Let's talk about cause marketing. We were chatting in the green room, and you were like, Julia, each one of these topics that we're going to talk about today could be its own show, because there's such big topics. But we did want to kind of put everything together so we could kind of hone in on the concept. But cause marketing. Cause marketing is one of those things, you love it, you hate it. It's like winning the lottery, or it's going to jail. It just seems like there's a lot out there. Is this something that we should be thinking about or are really moving towards? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that cause marketing satisfies a lot of needs for an organization. And so one of those is clearly revenue, whether it's a pinup campaign or you're rounding up your purchase, price, or a percentage of sale, whatever that looks like for the cause marketing campaign. There's that financial, aspect of it. Then there's also the huge marketing and brand awareness that comes along with cause marketing. So there, what is the soft dollar value? And I think you should really think about that. Yeah. What is the soft dollar value of the marketing exposure that your nonprofit and your nonprofit's mission and programs are receiving because of the cause related marketing? So those are kind of the two things that I think about. It's the funding, but it's also, the marketing and the brand awareness that takes place for the nonprofit. The one piece of cause marketing that we might forget about, and it was something that I would often really look at when I was doing kind of mass market events and thinking about, okay, if I have a sponsor, the sponsor's a grocery store, let's use a walkathon, for example, because that's one of my real lived experiences. A grocery store is selling pinups, they're tennis shoes for $1. You put your name on a tennis shoe, and the store puts that up around where the registers are. So you're earning those funds, and you're getting that exposure. But then there's also thinking about, does this particular partner, this retailer, do they have a matching gift program with their employees? And so I would always go back to, after an event, especially a mass market event where we often would ask, it's an optional, but we would ask their place of employment. And then I would go through and see how many of them were working somewhere where there were matching gifts, and then kind of aligning them with their organization to get that matching gift as well. So that's just kind of a piece of these cause marketing partnerships that exist through matching gifts that we sometimes don't really think about.
Right. I love that you brought that up, because it's a heavy lift if you don't have marketing support, or just the ability to understand the marketing value, right? Which is not always a direct line from development. A
I
lot of
also
times
think,
we separate
yeah,
it out.
mission alignment's really important too, because some consumers can be a little turned off by a cause marketing initiative because they don't really feel the connectivity between, the partnership. So you have to make sure that that's kind of really clearly defined in some of your marketing, whether it's been that, this organization has a giving mission, and we clearly align with that giving mission. This particular organization has 100 volunteers that support our organization every year. So really showing that alignment, because quite frankly, as a consumer, I'm not necessarily going to shift my giving for a 10% gift. Now, if you want to talk about 20%, if you're giving 20% to the nonprofit, then yes, I'm going to shift my spending. But 10% is not necessarily something that motivates me on its own to shift my purchasing power or my habits without something else to evoke an emotion or to really want to support that partnership.
Yeah, I love that you said that. That's really honest. And I think that is something that we've got to look at. Absolutely. What is that motivation, switch for somebody to navigate towards a topic they might not even know about, right? An organization they might not even care about. So you're absolutely right. I think that's really, really smart, and one of those things that makes all the difference in the world. As we wrap up, started to say round up because you got me thinking about rounding up. As we wrap up today, let's talk about the talent spectrum that we need. And should we have staff members that just lead each one of these revenue streams and opportunities? I mean, in a perfect world, yes, but probably not an option for most of our 1.8 million non-registered nonprofits in the US. How should we be thinking about this?
Yeah, you're right. Probably, pardon me, probably not an option for most.
Yeah.
But there are different skill sets involved in these different lanes. And, I talked a little bit about galas, and I'm not advocating that there be more galas or more events. I'm just using that as an example. Mm-hmm. But your individual, and they exist. I know that they exist. I know people that can do any of these and can do them with tremendous success. But typically, you don't have a whole lot of unicorns running around in your office, and so you need folks that have specialization in these different lanes. The person that's going to run a really successful gala that really is mindful of guest experience and what does the check-in look like, and how many bars do I need to make sure that folks aren't sitting in queue for too long to get their cocktail, and what is the right guest speaker and what should the entertainment be. I mean, those are all things that are really important when we talk about the guest experience at our gala. None of that, or maybe very little of that, has to be considered when we're looking at soliciting and securing major gifts. Right. There is still that relationship component that we've talked about in all of this work. So if there's any kind of core skill that we need in the space, everyone needs to understand relationships and be able to develop them. But beyond that, it's very different skill sets. You talk about grant writing, very different skill set than the folks that are in charge of your guest experience at your gala. Mm-hmm. So if you have the opportunity to have individual staff lead these revenue streams, amen, hallelujah, all day long. But if you don't, then please make sure that you have the opportunity, whether you have to advocate for yourself or if you're a leader listening or watching the show, create professional development space for your team. That might be time, it might be time and money. But creating that space for professional development, providing the tools like we talked about, Julia. So many tools exist now, digital tools that didn't exist even 5 years ago. So just having all those bells and whistles to be able to effectively diversify your stream is really, really important. You have to invest in it before you can really start to lean into it.
Right. I love that you brought that up because, the number of nonprofits that literally trash their volunteers and their staff to put on an event when they could have hired a professional event company or events manager and then been able to focus on the relationships and the cultivation of those gifts and the stewardship of those gifts. There's been too many times when I know in my community, so it's got to be everywhere, an organization literally has to close up 2 to 3 days after an event because their staff is just exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
When those are the days that they got to be hustling, they got to be like thanking everybody and really, rallying the troops and getting those people that went to an event that got excited engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's something that we that saying, penny wise, pound foolish, right? Going back and forth as to what's the value of your penny and what's the outcome going to look like. Hard to do when you're in the middle of it and you're thinking, well, we just gotta do it ourselves.
Yeah. No, it's really hard. And if you're in that space, meaning your organization is in a space where you're just now starting to look at, because you're seeing in real time what's happening to nonprofits that have relied heavily on one funding source. And now you're either scrambling or maybe you have a little bit of a cushion that can carry you. And so you're having these conversations. The important thing is to, really have the strategic conversations, do the strategic planning, start diversifying your fundraising streams. Even if it's this year, we're going to broaden and launch into one new lane. You don't have to launch 6 lanes next year, 3 lanes. Just do your diligence, gather the data, have the strategic conversations, and determine what lanes are right for your organization based on your resources and what your market supports. And then introduce your next fundraising lane with all of that behind your decision making.
I love that. I think that's a great way to wrap up our conversation today. Again, each one of these things that we've discussed could be its own show, but we wanted to kind of pull back a little bit and just kind of give an overview as to how we can be thinking about this in a different way. And I think especially, Tony, what you said is really magical about how we grow. We identify the lanes that we're in, and then how we grow our team to support each one of those lanes. And sometimes it's about closing lanes too.
And I like what you just said. It is sometimes about closing lanes. And that's why, I was saying that strategic and difficult conversations, because sometimes that's what it means. We've been doing whatever this is for the last 5 years, and it's not just yielding what it should. Time for us to sunset that and look at something else. But real quickly, Julia, what I hope we do every week, in addition to shows like this where we provide an overview, I hope that we are in some way giving folks permission to look at things differently, that we're empowering them to advocate for change and to advocate for conversations that may not be happening within our organization. So it's one of the things that I get so much joy out of every week in doing these shows with you is the hope that in some way, shape, or form, we're giving folks permission to really lean into some of these subjects and themes and to start the conversations that need to be had.
Right. I love it. That's a wonderful way to wrap up. Well, we have wonderful supporters that also help us wrap up each and every day, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, your part-time controller, of course, us on Fundraisers Friday, and Holdings for Good. Tony, a great conversation. You really got me thinking about some things in a different and new way, and then reminding me of some old things that I think I had forgotten. And so that's just wonderful. As we end each and every episode, we like to leave with this message: complex but simple. And it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well.